Hello.
Hi. How are you guys doing?
Ladies.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the virtual Six Bridges Book Festival. We are so happy to have you guys here. I have two wonderful, amazing authors with us tonight. Before I introduce them, my name is Arshia Khan. I am a local editorial photographer and a visual storyteller in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I'm sure I know plenty of a lot of you, but if you don't know me, I'm always taking pictures. And when I'm not taking pictures, you could probably find me cooking something fantastical in my kitchen or knitting. But anyway, I wanted to say before we start, one other thing. If you guys have questions that you would like to ask, please type them in the chat box, and that way I can see them. And when we get to the point where we need to ask questions, I can ask them. So I will introduce the books first. We have these two wonderful, amazing books. This one is Salty, Bitter, Sweet. This is by Mayra Cuevas, right down there. This one is pretty romantic and amazing. It is like a slow burn romance, and it takes place in a very cutthroat culinary world. This one is Lifestyles of Gods and Monsters by Emily Roberson in the scarf there. And also amazing. It's more like it's like Greek mythology meets the Kardashians. And I loved it. I love them both. So I am very honored to present both of our guests. I'll start with you, Mayra. I'm going to read her bio, and then I'll read Emily's, and then we'll get started. Mayra Cuevas prefers love stories with a happy ending. She was born and raised in Puerto Rico. She is currently a producer and writer for CNN who keeps her sanity by practicing Buddhist meditation and serving on the board of directors at the Kadampa Meditation Center in Georgia. She lives with her husband, who is also a CNN journalist, and their cat in the charming town of Norcross, Georgia. Her claim to fame.
We have a dog now. We also have a dog now.
Wonderful. Okay, so now they have a dog. What is your dog's name?
Maggie. She's a rescue daughter. Yeah. I need to update the bio.
Okay, cat and dog named Maggie. And her claim to fame came as her family appeared in Buying and Selling by the Property Brothers, which is amazing.
Awesome. We get to keep a lot of the stuff.
That's so fun. Again, she is the author of this one. And then we have Emily Roberson. Emily Roberson has been a bookseller in Little Rock, a newspaper reporter in Vicksburg, a marketing manager in Boston, and a writer in Chapel Hill and Dallas. She graduated from Brown University and has a master's degree in English from the University of Texas at Austin. She now lives in Little Rock, Arkansas with her 3 sons and no pets, unless that has changed.
Well, no pets. I do actually have a husband too, though, so not the same as a pet, but
anyway, so those are our 2 wonderful authors. Ladies, I will let you take it from here. Emily, if you would like to go first and say hello and read, and then Mayra, you can go next and then read.
Sounds good. Okay, so this is Lifestyles of Gods and Monsters. It's a retelling of a Greek myth with a reality TV setting, and I'm going to read you guys the opening scene. So, chapter 1. And I will tell everyone, this part of this story is 3,000 or more years old. So, it may be shocking, but it's really old. So, okay. You will have seen them, I suppose. The grainy pictures taken with a long telephoto lens. It has been 14 years, but they still shock. She has a face that everyone knows. Beautiful, determinedly blonde, curated. The tabloid writers say, never a hair out of place. In the series of paparazzi shots, she strides across the pasture. No Photoshop, no airbrush, no filters. It's a long walk. And the photographers got her from every angle. As always, she is trim, tanned, and toned, another favorite tabloid descriptor. If her sheet of golden hair and blue eyes are familiar, her expression is not. Usually, her face in pictures is cool and composed, icy. In these, she is ravenous. She never could hide how she felt about that bowl. And I'll stop there because
I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. Thank you. That was great. Mayra, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I really was hoping to see all of you in person. I'm in Norcross, Georgia, but I really, really wanted to see Little Rock for the first time and check out your gorgeous landscape, your beautiful bridges, and your amazing restaurants. So if anybody has any good food recommendations for when I actually get to come and visit, hopefully next year, please put them in the chat because I'm all about the food. And also your questions. Like I love getting questions from readers and from viewers. And this is just so amazing just to have a great Q&A. So let me tell you a little bit about my book. I call it a YA foodie romance because when you read it, you are starving the entire time. Because if something I can write, it's food. And Arshia can probably tell you about that. It's just, I love food. I'm super passionate about food. I have lived through the pandemic by baking my butt off. So I put all my knowledge of food in this book, and I also did a lot of research with restaurants here in Atlanta and watching documentaries and that kind of thing. So I'm going to read you the opening, just a little bit of the opening scene so you can get a taste. Chapter 1 is called The Perfect Souffle. Happiness, like love, arrives through the kitchen. At least that's what my abuela Lala used to say. I ponder her words, feeling every bit happy in the kitchen as I wipe a cheesy smudge of my recipe book, then lick my thumb. I sigh in pleasure. I may not know much about love, but judging by the perfect balance of Gruyere and Parmesan, I definitely got the kitchen part down. Though I can't take the credit for this French marvel, my copy of Larousse Gastronomique is so worn I could probably taste each dish simply by licking the border off the page. Larousse, also known as the French Culinary Bible, says an ideal souffle should have a melting texture, a creamy center, and stand for 2 to 3 minutes without deflating. Currently, my deflation time is 1.5 minutes, at least 30 seconds short from passable and a full 1.5 minutes away from perfection. Morning, kiddo. Papi saunters in and heads straight for the coffee maker. Did you sleep in the kitchen? He fills his coffee mug, one that reads, I'm as corny as Kansas in August. God, he really is. How a Cuban American born and raised in the Midwest ended up living on a sherry farm in France is beyond my comprehension. Life is so weird sometimes. Okay, so that's just the first page. And from there, Lala goes into this awesome kitchen competition in order to win an apprenticeship at a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant in Lyon, France, which is a UNESCO heritage site because it's the gastronomic capital of the world. She's going to be in the kitchen with she's only one of 3 girls in a kitchen just full of young men who are trying to dominate the space. So she's gonna have to elbow her way to the top, and in the process make some friends and some enemies. And there's also a very, very, very hot Spaniard love interest with an albino dog. So that's me in my book.
Amazing. Yes to all those things. Emily, I was going to say, if you want to chat just a little bit about your book, I said, just a brief introduction.
Yeah, I should have said that. Okay, so I'll tell you guys, the blurb is really good, so I'm mostly going to read the blurb because I love it. 16-year-old Ariadne's whole life is curated and shared with the world. Her royal family's entertainment empire is all over social media. beloved by the tabloids, and the hottest thing on television. The biggest moneymaker, the Labyrinth Contest, a TV extravaganza in which Ariadne leads 14 teens into a maze to kill a monster. To win means endless glory. To lose means death. In 10 seasons, no one has won. When the gorgeous, mysterious Theseus, he's mysterious, but there's more to find out. When he arrives at the competition and asks Ariadne to help him to victory, she doesn't expect to fall for him. He might be acting interested in just to boost ratings, but their chemistry is undeniable. But what Theseus doesn't know is that saving the monster may be the most important thing to Ariadne of all. So I took this ancient myth and I just moved it right up to modern times and added a big dash of Kardashian and told it from the point of view of the girl whose story really normally gets told as falling, in love at first sight. And I didn't want to tell that story at all. So it's much more about the choices we have to make and how to find your way through your family. And I really wanted teens to read it and love it. So.
Perfect. That's a great description. That's exactly what it is. And definitely worth reading. If you guys have not read either of these books, please pick them up. I think there is a link in the chat box from Justin. You can get them locally from Wordsworth, or you can order them from the Six Bridges book website. Both amazing reads.
And they did make an audiobook of Lifestyles, which is just amazing. Like the reader they got is so good. She has that kind of California voice, which I don't have, and it's just like awesome.
I know. I love my audiobook too, and I love my reader. Like, they gave me these options for my reader. They said, here are the people we're thinking about, and my husband and I sat down and listened to every one. And I love mine because she spoke multiple languages. So my books has like 6 different languages in it, so she could actually say things in the correct pronunciation, which was really nice.
That's awesome.
So what's so funny about mine, Mayra, is that like I'm a reader, so I had no idea how to say any of these words. Like one of the sisters, I didn't know how to say her name. That's so awesome. The audiobook people actually like reached out to classics professors.
Oh, I love that.
To figure out how. So when I'm listening to the audiobook, she's saying everything correcely. So it's actually really exciting.
Awesome. I love that. So I love your book, Emily, because I went through this huge Greek mythology phase when I was a teenager.
Yeah, me too.
I wish I would have had your book to read when I was that age. So we had like old school encyclopedia volumes in our closet at home. So the bottom of the closet was like this huge encyclopedia that my mom had bought. And the only like tome that I would ever pull out was the Greek mythology. I actually read that thing like a total geek, like cover to cover. So I love that. Yeah.
Well, actually, that has some. So we haven't had a lot of questions yet, but I do have a question in relation to that, and it's for you, Emily. I was also obsessed with Greek mythology growing up. I feel like most people were. It's so cool. I wanted to ask you, since it's so inspired by Greek mythos, did you have to do a lot of research?
Okay, so what's funny is because I was a kid, just like both of you, I didn't have to do as much research as you might have thought, because what I wanted to do was, I didn't want to be so wedded to the quote unquote original that I couldn't mix it up. But I did want, you'll see when you get to the story, what I really did want was to have as people read, to have them think, is she going to change this? Is she going to change this? And some things I did change and others I didn't. And I kind of went in knowing which ones I wanted to change. So my research was mostly actually Wikipedia. Like I did not, but I did do something super fun, you guys. It was actually really fun research. So there's an archaeological site on Knossos in Crete, which is the place where it's spelled Knossos. Again, maybe it's Knossos. That's what I say. in Crete. And there's an archaeological site there for where the palace of the kings was. And you can go there. I went there on a high school trip, like right after I graduated high school. I went on a, like one of those, if it's Thursday, it must be Belgium, kind of see Europe in 5 days trips. And we went, one of the places we went was Crete. And so I've always had it in my head. It turns out that the 19th century archaeologists who rebuilt it just kind of guessed a lot. So it's not like it's like truthful, but I did, when I was writing the book, I overlaid what we know about where those places were on the island of Crete. So as I was building my mental model of this sort of Dubai-like city where they live, it's the distances are the same as they would be on the original map. So that was really fun because it ended up that like there's a scene where Ariadne and Theseus go running, and when you look at the map, it's actually like from the palace to the ocean is like over a mile, because it turns out they wanted their palaces back by the mountains for the air and everything, not down by the sea. So that definitely that research changed the book, and was also just really fun, just playing in Google Maps and stuff.
Very nice. It looks like we are getting a lot of questions from the audience, but before we do that, Mayra, I wanted to direct a question to you. Your main character is Isa, and she is, am I saying her name right? Is it Isa?
Yeah,
for short? Isa. And she's of mixed race, right? She's like Cuban and American and French. And it was really nice to see that representation in a book. And I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about a representation in YA novels, especially for women of color? Was that a bit, like, was there a reason that your character was multi-cultural?
So representation is very, very, very important to me as a person of color. Like I grew up with a lot of access to books written by Latin American authors. So I grew up being able to see myself in the books that I was reading, and that had a big impression because for me, I could always be the hero or heroine of my story. And, you know, when I grew up in Puerto Rico, I moved to the States when I was 22. So when I moved to the States, I saw like this huge gap in the books in English. When I would go to a bookstore, there weren't a lot. I love YA. I think YA is an amazing genre, even for adults to read. Everything's happening for the first time. Everything's new. So I was always attracted to those books. So when I would go to the bookstore and I would try to find books that I wanted to read in the YA section, I could never find books with girls on the covers that look like me or who were basically not white. I mean, it was most of the authors are white. You know, the covers represent that. So I thought that was a big problem because, you know, there's a huge Latinx population in the U.S. There's Black readers, Indigenous, and that's only talking about race. That's not even going into the sexual preference and all that stuff, and, you know, books for LGBTQIA. But I really, really wanted to write books with a diverse cast of characters where diverse kids could see themselves in the story, and not only could see themselves in the side characters, but in the main character. As you may know, there's been studies about the number of books that are published in the U.S. The numbers have not changed a lot, even with the efforts of organizations like We Need Diverse Books, Las Musas books that are pushing for more representation in a very white industry, which is publishing. Out of about 3,000 books that are of children's books that are published in the U.S. every year, only about 250 represent Latino or Latina characters that are written by Latino authors or Latinx illustrators. So it's a really low number, and the numbers are similar for, you know, Black, Indigenous, and other Asian, other people of color. So I think it's important. I think, you know, one of the things that I'm doing this year, because of the pandemic, I had the opportunity to found and co-chair the first ever Latinx Kidlit Book Festival, and it's going to be a virtual gathering of Latinx authors and illustrators. You can go check out our website. It's latinxkidlitbookfestival.com. It's going to be December 4th and 5th, and we're really, really trying to make this a virtual field trip for classrooms so we can get teachers, educators, readers to promote Latinx voices, among readers.
That's awesome. And I will say, as a brown person, and I'm not Latinx, but it made a huge difference reading it, because you do feel represented in a way that's different. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
and
awesome.
as like right now I'm working on 2 new picture books, and they're very much about a little girl and a little boy connecting with their grandparents, and their experience is very Puerto Rican. Like, what it's on the page, it's my Puerto Rican upbringing, my experiences with my grandparents, but everyone that has read it has felt so connected to the story, because no
That's
matter
awesome.
where we come from, the emotion that we feel and the love and the compassion and these things tie us all together. They're all universal. So there is universality in specificity.
That's all. Yeah, exactly. I love
think
that.
too, I feel like one of the things that I have loved about this whole movement is like Black and brown people have been having to see themselves through white characters forever, and they've done that, and it's produced all this amazing stuff. So people make it sound sometimes like it's something bad that white people should have to do the same thing, but that's actually amazing, right? Like the fact that like I could read a character who's Puerto Rican and see myself in her is just as like, it's just as much amazing. Like it helps everyone. Like it's good for everyone.
And it's all about connection, right? I mean, why are Emily and I doing what we're doing? It's about connection. So when readers read fiction, and this is supported by a lot of science, fiction, basically your brain can't really tell the difference between reading fiction and what's happening in real life. So you're actually experiencing those feelings, like you're actually living through them. So what that does is that it helps you empathize with others, which we need that so badly right now. We need to like figure out ways to come together to understand each other. And I think reading fiction does that very well, because you can put yourself in other person's shoes. And for young people, it helps them practice scenarios and practice emotions that they're going to experience as adults, right?
Yeah.
We develop compassion, we develop empathy, we see the world through somebody else's point of view. I mean, and that's just one of a million reasons why I love writing for children, because it's so powerful.
It is. It definitely is. I've never heard of it described in that way, like learning in that capacity, but that's so true, because I think of like my experiences as a young reader is you're kind of feeling those emotions for the first time in the book and understanding them before you actually experience them in your life. So that's so powerful. We have a lot of good questions, you guys, and there's many. But I am going to start with Mary C. And she asked, and this is to both of you guys, I'm assuming, but have you guys had reactions from teen boys from your books? And Emily, if you would like to go first.
I have had a few reach out to say they liked it, but I wouldn't say like a big specific.
So I will say I was very ashamed. I'm going to tell this story with a little bit of personal shame because I went to, when the book came out in March, it was a few weeks before the pandemic, I actually managed to do an in-person school visit. So I went to the school visit and, my biased brain went in thinking, oh my God, like the boys are just going to be totally bored with this presentation. They're going to think this is stupid. They're going to have no interest in the book, all this stuff. So I'm thinking all this stuff, right? So then I get there and I do the presentation, and I had so many boys come in, not to me, to ask questions, so interested about what I was doing, about the book. They actually bought the book. And I was just like, see, I am like, these are like my own, my own biases, like my own, like, just, you don't think that when you're writing a book. For me, I was writing this book for girls. It was for young girls so that they could, my message was always like, you can find success on your own terms. Don't let anyone tell you what success looks like, because that took me a long time to learn. I didn't learn that until my 30s. So I really wanted to pass that theme and that learning opportunity to young women who are starting to think about their careers and all that stuff. So that's what I had in mind when I wrote the book. I never had in mind that I was writing for young teen boys, but that's the beauty about these books. It's like you never know who is going to connect with the books. And I've had so many adult people also reach out and tell me that they connected with the grandmother in the story. They connected with the food, that, they were thankful that they had something happy to read during the pandemic, which apparently is like very rare. So yeah, you just, now I'm writing and I'm like, okay, this, who knows where this is going to end up, right?
So I actually, Mayra, you say that, and I totally forgot. At the school visits I was at, the boys had as much to say about the social media pressure as the girls did. And I think we often, because that is thematic in the book, and I think we often act like the specific pressures of being public on social media are just a girl thing, but they're totally not. Like the boys in this, I did a few like school visits with Q&As and stuff. And the boys had some really interesting insights about the difference between your public face and your private face and what you show on social media as the girls did.
Wow. Yeah, that affects everyone, right? I mean, across the board. Emily, I actually have a question for you from Judy B. Goss. She asks, Emily, you went to Greece when you graduated from high school. How does that trip look in the rearview mirror after writing your book? And she also said she loves your book.
Yeah. And this is my high school creative writing teacher.
Oh, nice. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Judy.
That's awesome.
And she knows about that trip because our common beloved, no longer with us, English teacher, Susan Taylor Barnum, she was later Barnum, led that trip. That trip changed my life. Like, hilariously, it was supposed to be a big trip with a bunch of people, but our school only sent 2 of us. So it was me, another teenager who is now an artist, and about 10 older ladies, along with a busload of Californians. And we got to explore Italy and Greece with the most dapper Englishmen you've ever seen. And it absolutely colors, I think, everything I've done since then. Just seeing those ladies, Miss Taylor, her sister, and the way they were so empowered in the world, the way they were so themselves, just gave me this model of a way to be in the world that I hadn't really thought about before. And seeing those places in that way where it felt like, I mean, we were on this big trip, but often it was just me and Andrea together on a bus in Greece, the 2 of us, because they trusted us so much. Like, these, our chaperones, their feet hurt. They didn't want to go on the tour, so they let us go. And I feel like that absolutely is part of this book, because imagining myself into that world has been part of my life ever since then. So wow. I think it definitely over time grew into this book.
Wow. So would you say the idea from the book came from that trip? Like,
I would say that the idea of seeing our modern world through the lens of the ancient past came from that trip. just the way when you go there and you suddenly realize, like when you see Pompeii and you see graffiti and you're like, they were like us. Like they weren't, we are all part of this like human experiment. Like they were like us. And so whenever I started thinking about the myths, that just kept coming back to me, like, what would it be like to experience this? And that they would feel about it the way we would feel about it.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. And to be able to have experienced that so young, you know, and to carry it with you, that's amazing.
I wouldn't say it was like instant. I would say it was more but it was so interesting to be with, just thinking about writing for teens, Mayra, to think about being with that busload of Californians and who were like I mean, I'm from Arkansas, like by any measure, they were probably cooler than we were, but like, it was so obvious to me that my time was much better spent paying attention to these older ladies or hanging out with like the hitchhikers that we ran into. Like, it was just so interesting to actually decide at 18, like, I'm not going to pay attention to this huge group of my peers at all. It was just like a really interesting thing looking back on it.
I really, really do feel like you have a contemporary YA in the works with all
I've been thinking about it.
That sounds like a great, great book. That would be awesome.
One of the ladies is a really famous lawyer from Little Rock. And she was one of the first female attorneys. And she would say, I hate men. That's Ginger Atkinson for any Little Rock people. I hate men. I've been married 7 times. I hate them all.
That's awesome.
Well, we have another question addressed to the both of you guys. Mayra, if you'd like to take the lead on this one. This is from Susan. She asks, you've both written YA books. How do you personally market to teens? Social media to teens, or more conventional marketing to older adults? Like which do you guys prefer? More older adults like me who may buy the books for younger family members. So how do you guys tackle marketing?
So thank you, Susan. And I will tell you, I have never met an author who says, I love social media. Like, Emily, isn't that right?
That's totally right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of do social media begrudgingly. You know, it's tough because writing is very solitary, and you know, it really, it's a lot of writers are really introverts, even if they have bubbly personalities, you know, and it's tough to have to spend all this time, you know, really focused and concentrated on the story, and maybe you check in with other writers, authors, but really that's it. And then all of a sudden take the story that you have been like working on and carrying with you, and you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you have been living the story for a year, 2 years, 3 years, even sometimes even more. You know, Salty Bittersweet took a year and a half to write and another year to publish. So that it was almost 3 years by the time it was out in the world. And after 3 years to have to share the story on social media, it can be a little bit painful. There were tears in the process, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, you do the social media and stuff. The way that I try to connect the most with teens is through school visits. I love school visits. And a shout out if there's any educators or teachers or librarians in the audience. Like, you guys are amazing. And the work that you guys are doing through the pandemic, you are a national treasure. Thank you so much for doing everything that you do and going above and beyond the call of duty. So yes, I love doing school visits. I love actually connecting one-on-one with students. That's my favorite thing. Doing presentations and answering questions and really inspiring them to tell their stories, to write their stories, and to read and and to get involved and engage in something creative. And then, and like there's also events like all these virtual events and stuff like that, and you get written up and all that stuff. At some point, you gotta you gotta let your publisher do the heavy lifting, because my job is to write books, not so much market and promote them. So I do rely a lot on my publicist and my publisher. I'm with HarperCollins and about to move to Penguin to do a lot of the big work.
I would say all the same things she said, but also I actually have found one part of social media that I really like, which is playing in the website Canva.
Yeah. I love Canva.
It's a graphic design website, and that part, I have to say, like, in the whole, like, I found that small part, like, kind of a pleasant, fun, meditative thing to do when I had, like, probably other things I should have been doing. Just go play in Canva. And that has been really interesting, because that's a place where I did end up connecting with readers and bookstagrammers, which, for people who don't know, there's a whole subset of Instagram that is people who post about books. And they have various things like, actually, Mayra had one of the coolest, an author I know makes dresses inspired by people's books. And she did one for Mayra. So if you go to JF Kills Darlings is Jacqueline Bilkins' website, Instagram. But sometimes when you get creative about your stuff, you kind of stumble on other people who are doing the same thing. And that I have found to be a fun part of social media. I'm also like,
for Emily too. You have your own dress.
I do have my own dress. It's true. I carry business cards everywhere I go. And so if I talk to anyone who is interested in all about the book, and I don't care if they're like 13 or 80, I will totally tell them about my book. I feel like if I can't shout about it, I can't expect a single other person to do so. So I do that all the time.
That's amazing. Emily, what is the name of that Instagram? I'm putting
it on the chat.
Perfect.
Chat right now.
Perfect. I would like to see that. I want to see what other books I've read that she's done.
She's a costume designer. She's a writer,
yeah. Wow.
But she's also a costume designer and professor. So they're just beautiful.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Okay, we have another, I think this is for you, Emily, actually. This is from Wally, and he wants to know if you have any other plans for mythologically themed books.
For right now, I'm actually writing, actually, Mayra kind of called me up. For right now, I am actually working on a story about a young woman in Italy for the summer. So, because the summer after that, I went to a cooking school in Florence for the summer. And so there's this new Netflix show called Emily in Paris, which I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
But that sort of story has always just been one of my sweetest spots. And so it sounds really fun to me with everything going on with the pandemic, just to write a really fun, fish out of water, girl traveling rom-com.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds awesome. With lots of food. Hopefully there'll be lots of food.
Yes, lots of food.
And a hot guy or girl.
Yeah.
Oh, no, cute boys, 2 cute boys and lots of food.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
But I always think about myths, they're always, like I said, they're always there. I don't know the next one to do. I don't know the right one.
So I will say, Emily, I didn't say this, we didn't talk last time that we spoke, but my first manuscript ever was a myth-driven fantasy. I created these 7 worlds, and it was nuts. It was just this huge, fantasy story. I did all this research. I made maps and all this stuff. It got 200 rejections by literary agents. So it went nowhere. But if there's any writers in the group that are listening right now, dreams do come true, and you just have to be resilient and hang in there and just keep at it. So
that is fantastic advice. Yes.
Yeah.
In any field,
my
honestly.
first one was a 300,000 word Southern thriller that I didn't realize until I started to pitch it that it didn't have a protagonist. You're supposed to write like what the story's about. And I was like, it's supposed to be a person has something happen. I was like, oh, a town.
No, mine was I was learning to write, right? And
Yeah.
writing is one of those things that, you don't really learn how to do it until you're actually doing it.
Right.
And I'm a journalist. Like, I've been writing my whole life, my whole adult life, and I've been writing, poetry and stories since I was really, really young. But to write a book, it's a completely different beast. Like, just if you ever just sit down and you just finish a manuscript, you really just need to pat yourself in the back, because it's just a huge undertaking. And you learn a lot from your first manuscript. And, I think a lot of people go into writing sometimes thinking, oh, I'm going to write a book and it's going to be great and it's going to get published right away and I'm going to get an agent and it's going to be a bestseller and all this stuff. And it doesn't work like that. Salty Bittersweet was actually my third manuscript, that full manuscript that I wrote. I mean, I'm talking full critiqued, like spent years working on it, took it to different conventions to meet with agents and editors and all this stuff. So I mean, it's 6 years have passed since I started, and then since I got published. And then my second manuscript, which was a young adult camp story, it actually got me my literary agent, but it didn't sell. So sometimes you're like trying so hard to get an agent to represent you, thinking, okay, that's it, I have an agent now, it's really gonna happen, and then the book doesn't sell. So yeah, that sucked, dude. That was so crushing.
You think it'll get another chance now? I love a summer camp story.
Yeah, so my agent was like, okay, because I actually have four books deals that are in the works right now. So I'm like really trying, plus my day job. So I'm actually really trying to push myself. But she's like, no, you got to take this book and you got to turn it into middle grade. So I'm actually rewriting it, because the complaint was always that the voice was really young. So now I'm rewriting it as a middle grade.
Oh, I love that. I love a summer camp.
So you had four manuscripts.
Four manuscripts. This is the fourth. Lifestyles is the fourth. And I started, I queried my first book right about the time my oldest son was in utero. So like, that's like 2003. So,
wow.
I've been at this a long time. So but it's so fun. That's the thing. I feel like people, like every single one of those books, even though it didn't get published, it was so fun to write. Like, it's like having I can't even describe it. It's like you get to go play in a magical land. Like, it's so fun.
It's a creative process. We were talking, like, I recently read that book, Big Magic by Alicia.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
And, I love that, because it talks about just enjoying the creative process without fear or expectations. And, like for me, writing, like the two things that give me the most joy are writing and meditation. And writing is such a meditative state for me. So to sit down and just be creative and just be happy and enjoy it. Like you, Emily, like I enjoyed all those manuscripts that got rejected. I had so much fun. Like the fantasy manuscript, I actually did research at the British Museum. Like I went backstage, I met with their with all their history, archaeology people. I got to see all their mummies, the ones that are not on display. I mean, it was the most fun.
So I actually have a thought about this for everyone on the thing. So one of the things I found out when I was a reporter is that a notepad, which I'm sure you have one, but a notepad is a key inside all kinds of buildings.
Yeah.
You got that notepad, and then all of a sudden people are like, sure, Yeah, you can come whenever. Writing a novel is similarly, like, it's a key. Like, you don't, when you talk to someone at the British Museum, they don't ask you if you have an agent yet. They
They
just
don't
want to know if
care. No.
they're delighted, and
Yeah.
people love, once people hear you're working on a book, they don't want you to tell them the whole story, but they love to talk to you about what they know.
I
And it's
know.
just been this, like, I feel like this whole thing has just been this really fun adventure of getting to talk to other people about what they're really jazzed about. And that just makes my year.
That is fantastic advice. I would have never thought that like holding, something like looking the part would even get you into places like that. I can't imagine like how many people you both had to talk to get information and ideas. That's too cool.
People
And
are always happy to share what they know, what they're passionate about. If you're talking to somebody about, like, I'm sure if I were to talk to you about photography, we could be here the rest, all night.
It's true. We'd be here till tomorrow, at least. Well, one of the questions I had was about the writing process, and you guys have definitely answered the majority of it, but I am curious, do you guys have like a daily writing schedule? Is it just whenever? And Mayra, you could start.
So it depends. So if I'm working on a first draft, I will definitely set up, I'll set up a set time, a set schedule, and I'm usually a morning writer, so I'll get up early. I'll get up around 6. Sometimes if I'm really motivated, I'll get up at 5 and write when the house is quiet and everybody's still sleeping and I don't have distractions, which is great. So yeah, that's if I'm working on a first draft. If I'm working on a second pass or a third pass, I'll be a little bit more flexible with the schedule, and I'll try to do a lot of it on mornings and weekends. Sometimes I actually just take time off work. I work with CNN, and the company has a great, like many days of vacation, so I actually can use those for my writing stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'll go away for a weekend or a long weekend, or now I have to work on new edits for a new book next month. So I'm actually going away for a whole week to try to get them done as quickly as possible. So yeah, I mean, I love it. So I try to spend as much time with it as possible. I also try to take some breaks in between projects too, to kind of catch up on stuff at home and catch up on life and see friends and do other stuff. It's
have
tough.
A life.
Like,
yeah,
have a life. It's tough juggling, having a full-time job, having your family commitments, your friends, and my stuff with my neighbors, and commitments. I'm also on board of directors in a nonprofit with writing and your writing commitments. It takes a lot of time, but if I've said this to so many people, like, if you love it, try to write 1 page a day. 1 page a day, in a year you have a book, and you write with the time that you have.
That's excellent advice.
So
I
would say this last few years before the pandemic, I had a rhythm that I loved. Like, I'd drop everybody off at school, and then I'd go to my favorite table at Boulevard, which is my favorite coffee shop, and they recognize me, and I just sit there and get toast and coffee and stay there for a few hours, and everybody knew if I had my headphones in, like, I'm writing, and that was great. But then before my kids were in school, I was just writing in dribs and drabs of time. I was writing in a notebook with a kid asleep in my lap. I was writing when I was working full time and would come home. I would write like at midnight or 12:30. I think if you had, on some level, I've decided I'm made to do this. Like, I kind of can't not. Like, I'm really unpleasant to be around. And so if my life is such that I can write and like get my exercise in and bake some bread and stuff like that, I will do all that. But if it is such that like we're just eating takeout and I'm like falling asleep at my desk, then I'll still be writing. So I think for me, it's been really important now in the pandemic, where my creativity has been really up and down. to remember writing in those dribs and drabs of time. Like, I don't have to have a 4-hour stretch at Boulevard or a 2-hour stretch at Boulevard to write. Like, I really can write on my phone or in a notebook when the whole world is going crazy. Like, I've written a lot at baseball practice. At baseball games, actually. Is my kid's not at bat and you see me, I'm writing. Like
on a laptop or in a notebook?
on my phone or in a notebook. Just notes to myself. Like,
yeah, just outlines. I mean, it's so great. I do the same thing. Like, I have little notebooks and stuff, and like if I'm working on a first draft, like I'll do the same thing I'm always doing. Like, I'll be thinking of the scene all day, and I'll be like writing little notes to myself and outlining the scene as the day progresses.
Wow.
So when I actually sit down to write, I already know, I just have to kind of fill it in. I already know what the dialogue's going to be, what the characters are going to do, and all that stuff. But
so Mayra, so if you do that, if you spend all day outlining, when it comes to the end of the day and you're ready to write, does it all just come out?
Yeah, so it does come out a lot faster. Like, I've had, it's like everything. It just kind of, depends on what's going on in your life. Like, I have had manuscripts that come fully formed. Like, I recently wrote a picture book. I got up at midnight. By 2 a.m., that picture book was done. Like, and it came fully formed. The manuscript has not changed that much between when I actually wrote it and when it sold. Which is kind of nuts, but sometimes it's like that with some scenes, with some books, they literally just pour out of you, and they just come fully formed. Otherwise, you need to massage them a little bit more. The manuscript that I'm working on right now, which is another contemporary YA, I wrote like 2 whole chapters that got completely cut off. Like, literally, there was nothing salvaged from them. They just like came over. Like, so it's just like that. But it's
and no book tells you what the next book is going to do, which I was kind of hoping, or at least not for me so far.
Well, on a similar note, and I think we have time for like one more, but would you guys have any advice for young writers who are just like starting out and wanting to get their name out there? Maybe Emily, maybe you could start.
Yeah, I feel like here is the biggest one. Here's the biggest one. Okay, so you're going to have to share your work, but I have an enormous caveat. Make sure that you share your work with people who have your best interest at heart, number 1, and number 2, who read what you write. Because I did not share work for years. I wanted to be a writer since I was in 3rd grade. I wrote in Mrs. Goss's class, and then I proceeded to not write fiction again until I was working as a newspaper reporter and was like 25 years old. So that's like between 18 and 25. I didn't write any fiction. I went through all of college and didn't take a creative writing class. But the reason was because I felt really strongly, and I may have been wrong, but I think I was partially right, that had I taken my work, my froofy, fluffy, loves fashion magazines, loves social media, loves mythology work, to a creative writing class at Brown, I would have gotten smushed like a bug. I could be wrong about that, but I don't really think I am. What I didn't know that I could do was find other people who write what I write outside of an academic setting. I thought that creative writing classes through an MFA program were the only ways to learn to write. And that's just not true. There's wonderful writers organizations for all different kind of people. They're all over the internet now. So I would say absolutely share your work. But when if it comes back at you and it feels either like it's ugly or like they're saying what you're writing is stupid, stop showing that person your work. Because there's something for everyone. There is someone loves everything. Go. That's my
Yeah,
Fantastic advice. Yeah.
that is so important. And along the lines of that, I would just say save your money. You don't need an MFA to get
No, you do not need an MFA. No.
Don't take on
No,
loans
don't do
or
it.
extra debt. You don't need it. You know, you can. I like all my fiction writing. Obviously, I went to journalism school, so that helped with, that helped me to figure out how to tell a story. But like all my fiction writing is self-taught. Like I just pretty much just sat myself at Barnes and Noble and in front of the how to creative writing shelf, and I started pulling books and buying books on creative writing and reading them. Going to conferences is super important because you make a lot of connections and also you build your own writing community. And also joining critiques. Like I actually have a critique partner that we've been meeting. We meet regularly when we're working on a project. Like every week, we just exchange chapters. And I know that people have critique by getting your work critiqued. Like Emily was saying, hopefully critiqued in a supportive way, not critiqued in a out for vengeance and blood kind of way. So, and I'm going to add to my advice. I actually talk about this when I do school presentations. I have a lot of advice for young writers. The first one is that you have to be resilient. Like, the publishing industry is soul crushing. It is. It's just, that is just, if your feelings are hurt because you got a really, really horrible review, welcome to the show. Like, you're here, you have arrived. Like, we all go through this. Your feelings will get hurt multiple times by many different things. You just have to be, you can't really use your work to use external gratification. Your work is your joy. You put it out in the world and you just have to let it go. You enjoy that journey. Also, I will say to young people to use your stories, use your life to tell stories, but you don't have to be tied to the truth. You can kind of bend and shape and change it any way you want, but you can use that as inspiration for other people to see themselves in your own stories.
Both excellent answers. And I think a lot of the advice that you guys had to give wasn't just for writers, but is good life advice, like to be resilient. Yeah. And I think that applies to many, many creative fields, not just writing. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. Everyone who's watching, go pick up these books. They are amazing. And thank you guys for all being here. And if you guys have any interest, you should check out the schedule for Six Bridges Book Festival, and you can see all of the different wonderful things that are happening and all the different panels.
Yeah, there's a rage baking session.
Yes. In just a minute.
I need to know about it. So y'all need to go to the rage baking session.
Yes.
Next.
Yes.
Amazing.
Thanks so much for the festival. This was so fun.
Yes, thank you to all the organizers, and thank you, Arshia, for being our amazing moderator.
Oh, you were so great.
You guys are the best. You guys make it easy. You guys are my new best
Mayra,
friends.
when you do come to Little Rock, we've got so many restaurants to take you to.
I know.
Yes.
I want to know. If you guys have food tours, like I want to know.
Do we have food tours? We should. We have so many restaurants that are so good.
I'm down. Anytime. You guys just call me when you're here. I'm ready.
Thank you, guys.
Anyway, good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.